All right, so get this. We're going to look at UK higher education today. And things are getting a little interesting over there. Just picture all these universities like merging together. It sounds crazy, right? But it's a real possibility. And this Times Higher Education article is going to tell us why.
I think the really interesting thing about this article is it's not just some like random person's opinion. It was written by Joe Johnson, and he's a former universities minister. He was actually involved in setting up the Office for Students, the OFS, that regulatory body that's causing all this discussion.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely got experience with this. And he's not holding back at all in his criticism of the OFS. They just announced this pause on approving new universities and degree awarding powers. The OFS says they're prioritizing the financial health of existing institutions. But Johnson thinks this is a huge mistake.
Yeah, he thinks this is going to like restrict competition and limit choices for students. Think about it this way. If there were only like a handful of airlines, wouldn't plane tickets be super expensive? Johnson's saying it's kind of the same with universities. More competition should lead to more innovation and better value for students.
Okay, I can see that side of it, but I mean, keeping universities financially stable sounds like a good idea, right?
Well, yeah, but Johnson's saying that this pause could actually make things worse. He's talking about struggling universities needing to be saved by like a white knight institution. They would have to merge just to survive. But with this OFS pause, they might not be able to.
So if that lifeline's cut off, what happens to all the students and staff?
That's exactly the issue. It's not just about finances. There are real people involved.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. And Johnson doesn't hold back. He calls this pause a dismal message, especially to international students and investors. Like, imagine you're a student in India and you want to study abroad. Do you think you'd be more or less likely to pick the UK after hearing this?
I think Johnson is saying it makes the UK look less welcoming to international students, which could lead to big problems. Those students might take their tuition money somewhere else, like Canada or Australia, places that are actively trying to get more international students.
It makes you wonder if there are specific examples of these struggling universities or these potential white knight institutions. It's hard to really understand the impact without concrete examples.
Yeah, I agree. The article would be more effective with some real-world illustrations. This isn't just a theoretical debate. It's about the future of these institutions and the people who work and study there.
So we've got the OFS focused on stability and Johnson pushing for innovation. But the OFS does have a counterargument. They say this is all about protecting students.
Right. Philippa Pickford, she's the OFS Director of Regulation. She argues that by focusing on the financial health of existing institutions, they're actually protecting students from closures and instability. Basically, they're trying to prevent students from being left stranded if a university shuts down.
Yeah, that makes sense at first glance. But Johnson has a strong response. He's basically saying if the OFS is already having trouble with these financial issues, should they really be taking on even more responsibility?
He's talking about the OFS's plan to become the designated quality body, which is a role currently held by the Quality Assurance Agency. It means they'd be responsible for overseeing the quality of education at all UK universities. Johnson thinks if they can't even handle the finances, adding this responsibility is too much.
So for our listeners who might not be familiar with UK higher education, maybe we should explain what this designated quality body actually does.
Yeah, good point. Basically, they're like watchdogs. They make sure that universities are meeting standards for teaching, research, and student support. It's like an academic seal of approval. It makes sure degrees from UK universities are valuable, both in the UK and internationally.
So by questioning the OFS's ability to do this new role, Johnson's basically saying they should fix their own problems first, before trying to expand what they do.
Yeah, and he takes it a step further. He suggests that if they're really serious about quality, they should let another organization, one that's better equipped, handle this new responsibility.
Okay, so this narrative of the OFS just trying to help students is starting to fall apart. It seems like there are some big questions about their priorities, and maybe even their competence. This isn't just some theoretical policy debate. It has very real consequences for the future of UK universities.
Right, and Johnson's concerns go beyond just the immediate impact of this pause. He's worried about the long-term message it sends, not just to international students and investors, but to the entire higher education sector.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, don't try anything new, just stay afloat. But shouldn't higher education be all about innovation?
Yeah, that's Johnson's whole point. He's worried this focus on just being stable is going to stifle creativity, the creativity and energy that make UK universities so attractive.
It's kind of like telling a new musician to just practice scales and forget about writing songs. And this is especially interesting because of Johnson's background. He's always been a big supporter of challenger institutions, those newer universities that are trying new things. So do you think there's a personal element to his critique here?
Maybe it could be that he sees his vision for a more diverse higher education system being threatened.
Yeah, he even sits on the council of the Dyson Institute of Engineering and Technology, which is one of the few new institutions that's actually managed to get degree awarding powers. So he's seen firsthand how hard it is for these new places.
Right, so for him, it's not just some abstract argument, it's about real experiences and challenges.
And that makes his criticism hit even harder.
Yeah.
He's not just saying it's bad policy. He's saying it's actively harming the very institutions that could shape the future of higher ed.
Absolutely. And we also have to think about the global context here. The UK higher education system has always been a huge player internationally, attracting students and investment from all over.
But this pause could really hurt that reputation. If other countries think the UK is becoming too afraid of risk, too focused on keeping things the same, they might start looking at other places, like the US or maybe even Asia.
Yeah, and that could mean big economic problems for the UK. International students bring a ton of money into the economy. Even losing a small percentage of those students could have a huge impact, not just on universities, but on businesses and the whole country.
Wow, so this decision about approving new universities is a lot bigger than it seemed at first. It's not just about finances. It's about the UK's place in the world. It's about their economy. And it's about their reputation in education.
It really shows how everything is connected and how even small decisions can have really big consequences.
So we've talked a lot about Johnson's opinion and the OFS's response, but there are other people involved here too. What about the students? How do they feel about all this?
That's a great question. And it's something that the article doesn't really address. We need to know what students think. What do they want from their education? How do they see these changes impacting their future?
Yeah, and what about the faculty and staff? They're the ones on the front lines teaching the students. Their opinions are really important too.
Totally. They'll be directly impacted by any changes to funding or the structure of the system. They need to be part of the conversation.
So even though Johnson makes some really good points, and even though the OFS has explained their reasoning, there are still a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah, we've only just scratched the surface here. There are so many different people and factors involved.
And we need to think about the long-term vision for UK higher education. What kind of system do we want? One that's only focused on stability, or one that's open to new ideas and challenges?
That's the big question, and it's not easy to answer. It's about finding a balance. We need to think about everyone involved and find a way to move forward.
So it's like we've got these two different paths for UK higher education. One is all about stability, and the other is all about innovation. Kind of reminds me of those nature shows. You see a herd of antelope just hanging out, eating grass, then suddenly a bunch of cheetahs show up. So which strategy works better, playing it safe or being a little chaotic?
Well, in this case, the stakes are pretty high. It's not just about whether some universities survive. It's about the future of the entire sector. Higher education is a huge part of the UK's economy and their global reputation.
That's true, and it affects so many people, the students and the staff. It really makes you think, if you were in charge, what would you do? Would you go with the OFS and focus on financial stability? Or would you be more like Joe Johnson and push for innovation?
It's a tough choice. I mean, you don't want universities to be shutting down all over the place.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to stifle creativity and end up with a system that's stuck in the past.
Right. It's like trying to find the balance between a perfectly trimmed lawn and a wild forest. You kind of need both. You need that solid foundation of stability, but you also need that wildness, that unpredictable growth to keep things interesting.
Yeah, that's what makes this so complicated. It's not just about picking one side or the other. It's about finding creative solutions, maybe even some kind of hybrid approach, where you can have both stability and innovation.
Right. Maybe the system needs to be more flexible, more adaptable, so it can support both the established institutions and the newcomers.
Exactly. And maybe it's also about encouraging universities to work together more instead of seeing each other as competition.
Yeah, they could share ideas and best practices and work together to solve problems.
That brings us back to those questions we were talking about earlier. What do the students actually want? How can we make sure their voices are heard?
It's not just about financial stability. It's also about quality and making sure education is relevant to what students need for their future.
Right. At the end of the day, this is about real people. Students, faculty, staff, everyone.
They're all investing their time and energy in higher education.
And for our listeners out there who might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with me?
I think the answer is the future of higher education affects everyone. It influences the workforce, it drives innovation, it shapes our culture.
It really has an impact on the kind of society we live in.
So whether you're a student, a parent, or just someone who cares about education, the decisions we make today will have consequences for years to come.
Exactly. And as we wrap up our deep dive today, we want to leave you with this thought. Don't just sit back and let other people decide the future of higher education. Get involved, ask questions, and make your voice heard.
Because ultimately, the future of education is something we're all responsible for. And it's up to all of us to make sure it's a good one.